Vishya Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Okay, we are rocking and rolling. Thank you all for braving this New Jersey weather. I'm very familiar with it because I grew up in New Jersey, actually. My whole life, first part of my life, I grew up in Jersey City. And I got connected to this beautiful process and culture of Krishna consciousness at 26 2nd Avenue and Bhakti Center for those early 2000 years, in the early 2000s. And then I got married. We decided that we're going to try something different. We actually moved to Atlanta for about a dozen years. And quite recently, about 6 months ago, we just shifted to Raleigh so that we could have amazing opportunities just like this, to have all of your association, to be closer to my parents and family and friends. So we're very grateful. Also wanted to take a moment to extend my gratitude to Kalindi Priya Mataji. Very, very grateful. We actually were somewhat familiar with each other, and we were in Govardhan Yatra. Speaking of Pada Sevanam, we were in Govardhan Yatra just in October with about 10,000 other Vaishnavas. and somehow or other, by Krishna's arrangement, we were coming back from a holy place. Myself and my wife Tulsi Gopi were getting on the bus, and we sat. And then right across from us, Mataji sat. And she struck up a conversation, and one thing led to another. So I have this wonderful opportunity to hopefully praying to be of service to all of you. And I found out that you're currently in this amazing series of the 9 processes of devotional service. Very, very, very important that you do this. I'm grateful that you do this because it's easy to gloss over these things, and we are sometimes operating in autopilot as we do these things. I know, because I'm as guilty as anybody. Life gets busy. We need to just churn through and chug through our Krishna consciousness and our processes of bhakti. So it gets it's something that we can take for granted very easily. And so very important that we really dive a little deeper onto each of these steps, how they interact and how they nurture us, and the traps we need to avoid. So again, my gratitude to all of you, gratitude to Ramchandra Prabhu as well for allowing me this opportunity for service. So what will be our goals today on this amazing topic of Pada Sevanam? We're going to discuss what it is, what comprises of Pada Sevanam, where we tend to be very familiar with the first 3 steps of devotional service, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smarnam. Okay, that's something that's deeply ingrained, but I've noticed, not just in myself, also in interacting with so many Vaishnavas over the years, it trails off a little bit in terms of how we're supposed to immerse ourselves in the rest of the processes. So we'll define it. Then we'll talk about why, what's so critical about this. Why was this specially called out by Prahlad Maharaj? Why is this specially highlighted by our acharyas? Then we'll talk about what does it mean to do Pada Sevanam when you're a new Vaishnava, a new devotee in the movement, as compared to as you're evolving and maturing in your Krishna consciousness. So that's how we'll wrap up the discussion. My style is interactive as much as possible, so please feel free to jump in. You can wait to ask questions at the end, but in between, if you have a perspective, a question, or anything, please feel free. It's fair game. So very, very open to dialogue on these really important topics. So, what is Pada Sevanam? So, as I mentioned, we spend a lot of time and energy in Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, and it's very important. It's very important because that's our foundation bed, right? And it's the bedrock of our Krishna consciousness. And once we, actually, I'm going to ask Tulsi Gopi, I forgot my notes in my book bag. Can you just grab those for me, please? Thank you. So, we need to unpack the rest. What the beauty of Pada Sevanam, thank you, is that in the first three processes of bhakti, what do we do? What are we engaging in the first three processes? What senses are we engaging? It's the tongue, the ears, and the eyes, right? Or rather, the mind. Sorry, the mind, right? In the recollecting. I like to, especially when it comes to Smaranam. I'm sorry, I'm tracking back a little bit, but it's important. When it comes to Smaranam, I know we tend to reference it as remembering. I like to go a little deeper and consider it more as recollecting, right? Smaranam, because we can remember facts, we can remember pieces of information, we can memorize things. Smaranam is really, it's more of a remembering with feeling, right? Remembering with attention and consciousness, right? It's a deeper absorption of remembering. You're actually remembering what you felt at the time you heard a profound class, or you read an amazing purport from Prabhupada, and how that shaped you and how that helped you grow and evolve. So it's actually meant to be a very deep process, and we'll reference back to that. I just want to lay that groundwork because it's going to be actually very crucial when it comes to understanding the rest of these stages of devotional service. So with these three steps, we're laying as I mentioned several times, we're laying the foundation. But we have to leverage that foundation to actually fully unpack the rest of the aspects of devotional service, the rest of the stages. So Pada Sevanam is, we're getting into it like a whole new level, right? It's a level of immersion. Because before it was about the ears and the mind, and now we're leveraging our entire being, our entire body. Okay, so we're entering a whole new phase of immersion in Krishna consciousness, and we're going to absolutely leverage those initial steps as we go deeper into these steps. So, to define Pada Sevanam, Ambarish Maharaj is being exemplified in Bhagavatam. And it's a beautiful verse in Canto 9, Chapter 4, actually three verses. Would someone like to give this a chance? Give it a shot? We don't have to do call and response, Prabhu.
Karor harer mandir marjana drishu shrutim chakara chutat satkathodaye mukundalinga laya darsane drishu tadhritya gatra sparse anga sangamam ghanam cha tadpada saroja saurabhe Srimatulasya rasanam tadarpite Pado hare kshetra padanu sharpane Siro Rishikesha pada vivandane कामां च दास्ये न तु कामकाम्यया यथोत्तम श्लोक जनाश्रयार्ति.
Rivo. Very beautiful, Prabhu. Thank you so much. So, it's a beautiful verse describing how Ambarish Maharaj exemplifies the 9 processes of devotional service. And we're not going to break down every portion of the verse here for the sake of time. So I'm just going to dive into the translation of some of these portions and how it exemplifies specifically Pada Sevanam. Okay. Ambarish Maharaj exemplifies Pada Sevanam by cleaning the Lord's temple. He engages his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temples, and Krishna's places like Mathura and Vrindavan. He engages his sense of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulsi offered to the Lord. He engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasad. Doing some Pada Sevanam very soon. He engaged his He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord. And his head, he engaged himself with his head in bowing down before the Lord. And all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Sorry, I should have showed you this while I was reading. So these are just some aspects of Pada Sevanam. They also include, as mentioned in the verse and a few other additional examples, seeing the form of the Lord, circumambulating the deity, bathing in the holy rivers like Ganga and Yamuna and the Saraswati, performing Tulsi Puja, visiting the holy dhams, touching the form of the Lord, leading others to serve the Lord and the devotees. That last one is just as important as the others. If you are engaging you are directly engaging in Pada Sevanam, if you are inspiring others to engage in Pada Sevanam, not to be forgotten. So it's not just only in serving Krishna's lotus feet. That is absolutely comprised of Pada Sevanam. But it's also engaging our own feet to perform all varieties of service. So this is just a high-level gloss of different activities you can do to elevate your Krishna consciousness. Okay, the list is long and elaborate. We will now dive into why, right? The crucial part of this discussion is to why Pada Sevanam is so important and so powerful. The first is that because despite how powerful the first 3 processes of bhakti are, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, there is still opportunity for the ego to fester and rise, and for impersonalism to grow in our hearts. We've been to the holy dhams, many of us have, right? If not all of us have been to the holy dhams, and we see all types of personalities. Many of them engage in these aspects of activity, right? They're singing kirtans with so many people coming. They're doing so many amazing activities in service of the community, but in their hearts they still engage in Mayavad philosophy. They engage in impersonal philosophy. They're still capable of separating, creating that demarcation in their hearts. Okay, so and then from an ego perspective, we can perform heart-raising kirtans, right? We can give amazing classes. We can, be great shastris. And these things can give us incredible fame. So the first 3 processes are essential. right? They are essential, but they are not sufficient. We need more, right? At least for us, right? Of course, as we evolve into very advanced stages, we can dive into any one process of devotional service. As a matter of fact, as you're learning, every single process of devotional service is embodied by a specific personality. Anyone know who embodies Pada Sevanam? Very nice, Prabhu. Lakshmi Devi. Okay, Lakshmi Devi. So every single step of devotional service is embodied by a great personality. But until we're at that level, until we're at that depth in our Krishna consciousness, we have to make sure that we embrace all the processes of devotional service as intensely as we can. So it's important that we. So this is a very important reason to be aware that we can actually still, these things can still fester in our hearts, and therefore we need to keep advancing in our processes of devotional service. The other great value Pada Sevanam invites is humility, and that's because you're completely immersing your entire body in Krishna consciousness. So as I was mentioning, we had the amazing opportunity to do Govardhan Yatra for about, I guess, it was 8 days, I believe, and the final day of Yatra was Parikram, and it was incredible. We started the Parikram, and it was going really well, and then as we were, kind of doing the Parikram with the Vaishnavas, going through the paths, we started seeing individuals doing Dandavat Parikram. We were like, wow, that's just incredible. How can you do that? Being raised in the West, I could never imagine. And so we were just amazed. And then we started noticing entire families doing Dandavat Parikram together. At that point, there were almost tears in our eyes because it was not just the father, it was the mother, all the kids. In some instances, I saw grandparents doing it with them, and we were so moved. Just the very observation of these great souls doing this caliber of Pada Sevanam humbled us tremendously, right? Because I like to, in my mind, maybe think that I'm doing something great coming from the West and doing yatra. Oh wow, you're, really pat yourself on the back because it has its challenges. Even if you're not doing it to this extreme, yatra can pose all variety of challenges, right? Anyone had difficult moments in yatra ever before? Right? Please raise your hands if you've ever had a challenging time in any yatra, anywhere. Yeah? Quite a number of us. Anyone want to share any challenges you've had? Anyone like to? I know for me it was sleeping arrangements. That's always like top of my list. Is it proper sleeping arrangements or not? And in the early years, when I went to Mayapur Yatra, this was around 2003, 2004. I remember it was not the most ideal sleeping arrangements, and the washrooms were like, wow. It was tough. It was tough for me, and I didn't complain, but I was complaining within for sure. So it became, that was my challenge, right? And so, but then as years passed, those inner complaints started to soften, and they started to gradually go away because I started to appreciate what that experience gave me. I started to reflect deeply on it, right? I didn't just let it go. I didn't say, okay, never again. Instead, I took the time to meditate on those experiences. And year after year, I would reflect back and say, okay, is there something more I can peel from this opportunity? Did I miss something? in this experience. And that entire journey, that inner journey, that was tied to my external journey in the yatra, started to really allow me to appreciate the power of humility. So this is a very, very important aspect why we must engage in Padasevanam with full attention. The other is building a very personal relationship with Krishna through practical hands-on service, which Krishna deeply enjoys. This in turn kills the impersonalism in our hearts. My wife is smiling because these are our deities, Nitai Gauranga. So as I got introduced to this beautiful process of bhakti, through especially to the incredible wealth of knowledge Srila Prabhupada offered us, I thought I found kind of my sweet spot in Krishna consciousness, which was hearing and speaking and engaging my mind and all these kind of intellectual activities, and cultivating realizations. So that was going great. For years, that's how it was going. I was not really pushing myself to try other aspects of devotional service. So then my brother-in-law, Tulsi Gopi's brother, Jagannath Priya Prabhu, he encouraged me. Once we moved to Atlanta, we got a bigger house, and he said, okay, you have this space, let's fill it with something beautiful. And I'm like, I know what you're saying, Prabhu, no thank you. I was not ready. We had these Chota Gornitai deities. I'm like, this is fine. And he's like, trust me, you'll enjoy. You'll have a transcendental opportunity and experience. So I was really scared. And what he did was he procured these 2-foot Gornitai deities from Gujarat, if I'm not mistaken, right? Jaipur. The altar came from Gujarat. The deities came from Jaipur. And he did a full 2-day welcoming ceremony for Nitai Gauranga. We had about 150 to 200 devotees coming through our house, and it was the first time. It's amazing, actually. I felt like it was the first time I actually felt the Mayavad within me start to see the cracks. It started to kind of pull apart. And I'm like, I didn't even know you were there. I didn't know all that impersonalism was even there in my heart. But I started to notice, I started to see that, wow, this level of relationship is something I had never experienced before. Deity worship is a challenge for me personally. I'm more inclined to hearing and katha and I've had 5-hour conversations with devotees on all topics related to Krishna consciousness. I can do that. I can go without sleep doing that. I enjoy it so much. So this was a big challenge for me. And so, and it's still in many ways a challenge, but I have improved, I have grown, have progressed, and have seen how it shaped me and transformed me. So this is the power of Padasevanam. I've been able to build a much more personal connection and relationship to Nitai Gauranga and to Krishna. And that's only when we start to challenge ourselves. That's only when we start to see, well, I'm comfortable here, I'm not comfortable there. Maybe, and we'll talk about this at the end as we talk about growing and developing. And another reason why we engage in Padasevanam is that we put aside our upadhis, right? Rich, poor, male, female, young, old, right? When we all equalize ourselves as Vaishnavas, we become menial servants of Krishna. When we're on yatra, for instance, when we're here in the temple sweeping the floors, we're not making distinctions who should and who shouldn't. We just get involved. We do the service. When we were in yatra, so many yatras we've been to, We see devotees that we would often offer our obeisances to because they're so senior and they're so exalted and they've made so many amazing sacrifices, and they're serving devotees the prasadam the way the newest member of the community is serving prasadam. They're not thinking twice about it. So it equalizes us. And that is very, very important, right? We need to collapse ultimately all these upadhis. And that brings us to this beautiful, beautiful verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. If you're doing Bhakti Shastri, this is a penultimate verse that you must learn. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tat padratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesa kesha sevanam bhaktir uchyate. Bhakti or devotional service means engaging all of our senses in the service of the Lord. Pada sevanam, in full immersion. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of all the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. One is freed from all material designations, and one's senses are purified simply by being employed in the service of the Lord. Oops. So, that brings us to, okay, we know what is Pada Sevanam, and we know why it's important. Okay, how? What are some important lessons for us to employ, especially if we're new to Krishna consciousness versus some of us who've been around the block a bit, right? And we've done so much. When we're new to bhakti, and this is very personal. This is just my own realizations. You may have your own experiences and realizations. But when you're new to bhakti, variety is your friend. Right? When you're new to bhakti, try everything, right? Because you never know what hits and what doesn't. There are going to be services that you fully embrace and help you really grow and elevate and dive deeper and connect more deeply, more specifically with Krishna. And so when you're new to bhakti, you want to really kind of embrace these activities because they increase our faith, shraddha, right? And that inspires us to connect with devotees that much more, right? So when you're new to bhakti and you're testing the waters, you want as much opportunity as possible to associate with others, to see where people are in their stages of Krishna consciousness, what you can learn from them. Right? When I was in my early years, just figuring all of this out, I would spend time with individual devotees. I would sit down with them and I would ask them a lot of questions about things they would do that I would find, like really amazing. Because I never imagined that someone could be so absorbed in deity worship, or someone could be so completely committed to seva. I've met devotees who would do seva, incessantly. They would be addicted, and there may be a few members of the community here who are like that, completely addicted to just finding any opportunity to serve Vaishnavas at any cost. They were always the first to stand up, and they were always the last to sit down. And that was something new to me. I had never experienced that before. So these types of opportunities were golden. And I would take full advantage in literally interviewing these Vaishnavas to understand what inspired them to dive so deeply into this aspect of their Krishna consciousness. So these are just a few pointers. So try different things, explore different areas, and see where your anchors fall in Krishna consciousness. But then you try that, you're evolving, you're growing, and you realize that, okay, I think I found some sweet spots, because we all have to find those. It's really important that we anchor ourselves in some aspects of bhakti that are going to help us get through the difficult times. Right? There will be difficult times. I have a sneaky feeling some of you have experienced some of them at times, that we go through all types of challenges in life. And sometimes bhakti is not so convenient in those moments. Krishna consciousness is not so convenient. It's actually a lot more convenient to minimize it and push it aside. No one's looking, right? I'm at home, no one's looking. So it's natural. It's a human phenomenon, right? We go through all types of ups and downs in our journey. So when we have these anchor services, they remind us of what we are and why we are here, right? So it's so important that we eventually find those. That's the process of maturing in bhakti. Some other realizations I've had as I've tried to evolve and grow is being conscious of not being mechanical. Because we just went through a long list of things you can do in this Pada Sevanam, right? Long list, right? And eventually you may be like, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to really do this for a while. And then you get good at it, let's say. And that's the tricky part. When you get good at something, it's very easy to get mechanical with it, right? Or when you get used to something, it's just becomes second nature. It's very easy to not be fully conscious of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So how do I counteract that? At least for myself, something that's helped is if there's a specific service that I know is going to consume me for some period of time, sometimes I like to hear about that, someone talking about that service, or find an example in Shastra that exemplifies that service, and hear about it before I do the service, so that I don't just, it's not like I check my brain out because I know this service, I do it 1,000 times a year. Instead, I allow myself to actually question further and deeper as to why this is so important, why what I'm doing is so critical, why it's important that I don't just go and cut the veggies and just toss them aside, and I got to get this done because programs at this time and the festivals at this time, and we got to get so much done. And yes, we got to get so much done. It's no doubt about it, right? There are certain responsibilities we have when we commit ourselves that have a deadline, right? So yes, we have to do things, but there are things we can do to make sure that we don't lose track of why we're doing them, and that we don't take it for granted, and that we don't let these weeds of bhakti find their way. And this is how they find their way. So hearing beforehand can be very powerful, right? And then or reflecting after, right? Let's say you don't have time to hear. Your day is crazy. You have kids. You have a spouse. You have untold number of responsibilities, and then you have all the seva at the temple, right? There's a lot going on. So you go, you do your service, but then take some time to reflect. Introspection is a difficult thing to do, but it can be your best friend in Krishna consciousness. I have caught myself many times operating on automatic pilot and trying to remind myself that don't do this, be careful, it's a trap. These are ways Maya kind of works her way in. So very important to either hear beforehand, reflect after, especially reflecting after the service. What could I have done better? How could I have served better? And everything, and also what am I grateful for? Right? Why am I grateful for this opportunity, even if it was a challenging one? Sometimes I've caught myself in moments in the kitchen. It's very intense. Multiple devotees doing seva. Sometimes a little friction, right? I was using that Prabhu. Can you these things happen, right? And it can feel like, oh man, I'm doing service and Krishna sending all these difficulties. Come on, I'm trying to help here. So taking a moment after the service, emotions have calmed down. What went right? What could I improve? How can I change my perspective and how I'm dealing with someone? This is all Pada Sevanam, very important. Taking on uncomfortable seva, meaning things you're not used to doing. It can be tough. Maybe you're not used to giving class. Right? It's a challenging thing. Trust me, I'm nervous up here. It may look like I'm nervous. It may not look like I'm nervous. I don't know, but I'm nervous. This is not easy. Right? We have to going up and making a commitment to do extra rounds during Ekadasi or during a very holy day. You may not enjoy japa meditation, or or this is a really tricky one, but serving with someone you may not particularly like. It happens. We keep our healthy distance from certain individuals not because they're right or wrong or they're bad or good or anything. Just, hey, they have a different vibe, they have a different energy. I have a certain vibe and certain way of being. So better that we, keep our healthy distance. But am I missing out on a golden opportunity? Right? So finding those things, introspection, reflection on what we can do to elevate ourselves. All of these are just some ideas in how we can evolve and mature in our Krishna consciousness, and ultimately enable us to engage in anartha nivritti, which is, handling and calming those anarthas down. Right, calming them down. Don't get too hung up about destroying them. That's not really our job. That's Krishna's job, to be honest, to destroy them. But our job is to do our job. Our job is to pay attention, to acknowledge that they're there, and to do the best we can to improve. Krishna will step in and do the rest, as long as we're making our efforts. So this is the golden opportunity of Pada Sevanam, and golden opportunity that you all have because you're engaging this wonderful series of a very important topic. Thank you so very much. Hare Krishna.
Anybody has any questions?
Or reflections, thoughts, realizations, challenges? Anyone find anything I said uncomfortable, challenging, difficult? Wow, this is a self-realized group. Haribo.
Anybody else? Thank you. So I think it's very something that our spiritual practice, everybody, the aspect of humility is something the most difficult actually. So how Mother Lakshmi actually choose,
yes,
to take that part. So very difficult because everybody wants positions. Everybody wants to be at the head. I want to be observant on top of everything. But sometimes that humility of being, serving, that taking that insignificant position, like all the devotees aspiring to become a dust of the lotus of the Lord. Actually, is that even that aspire that is also very, very difficult.
Yes.
The aspect of humility, as Prabhuji have mentioned, very wonderful. So thank you again. So everyone, with loud Haribol, please thank Prabhuji for this wonderful topic. Haribol! 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 So hopefully we can again see Prabhuji.
Yes.
Sometime when he visits.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
A few minutes kirtan, then offering is there. Hare Krishna.